"You're not family anymore." That's what she said. Just like that, no hesitation, no shame. My daughter-in-law kicked me out of the house the morning after my son's funeral. No warning, no soft words, just cold eyes and a sharper tongue than I thought she was capable of. I hadn't even finished my morning tea. I froze. The words didn't register at first. It was as if she had spoken in a foreign tongue, and I was still waiting for the translation. "What?" I whispered. My breath caught in my chest. Vanessa smiled. Not a kind smile, not even a smug one. This was something else. It was cold, vicious, calculated. The kind of smile a woman wears when she's waited a long time for revenge no one saw coming. She took a slow step forward, her heels clicking on the floor that I had once scrubbed clean after Damon's first muddy football game. "I've been planning this for over a year," she said softly, her voice like velvet laced with poison. Damon was careless. So focused on building, he didn't see what was right under his nose. But I did. I saw the way he kept everything in his name. I saw the power in those signatures, the accounts, the property. I stared at her, horrified. She continued, "You think he was protecting you? He wasn't. He didn't even update the will. I made sure of that. Every little conversation, every suggestion I whispered into his ear, he thought it was his idea." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You're lying." "Am I?" She raised an eyebrow. "Ask the lawyer. Ask the bank. Ask anyone you like. The house is mine now. The money, the shares. Even Leo, he's mine to raise, to mold. You're just a guest, and that stay has expired." My knees buckled. I reached out, instinct, desperation. I grasped her wrist, my old hands trembling as I looked into her face, begging for any flicker of humanity. "Vanessa, please. Tell me this isn't true," I whispered. "Please, not after Damon." She jerked her arm away so violently that I lost balance. I fell backward, landing hard against the small memorial table we'd set up just 3 days ago, where Damon's photograph still stood with fresh lilies. The frame clattered to the floor. The glass shattered under my shoulder. Pain ripped through my arm as a jagged edge sliced my skin, warm blood seeping into my sleeve. I looked down and saw Damon's face staring up at me from the cracked glass. I didn't feel the sting of the cut, not yet. What I felt was worse. I cradled the photo in my arms, hands shaking, blood smearing across the edge. My son, my only child, the boy I carried, raised, protected. Now just a photograph on the floor, and I couldn't even protect that. Tears streamed down my face. My forehead rested against the frame. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." Behind me, I heard Vanessa scoff. "Well, now you've made a mess. Let me get you a Band-Aid. Wouldn't want you bleeding on the rug." I slowly stood, one hand clutching the photo, the other bracing against the table. My legs trembled, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of collapsing again. Vanessa handed me an envelope. "I called you a cab," she said casually. "They'll take you to the Green Pines Motel. Rooms paid for the week. After that, you're on your own. Oh, and I included a little something for you inside." I didn't look at the envelope. My fingers were sticky with blood, and I didn't want to stain anything more. She gestured toward the front door. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was a tight knot of grief and rage. I walked out of that house, clutching Damon's broken photo to my chest. The front door clicked shut behind me like the slam of a judge's gavel. The cab ride was a blur. The motel, a joke. Green Pines had 3 flickering letters and smelled like a nursing home's forgotten laundry room. Room 3 was cold, damp. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the photograph, now wrapped in my scarf. I finally opened the envelope. A check for $100. A brochure for Shady Pines retirement living. A clean break, just like she wanted. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I played Damon's voicemail on my burner phone. "Hey, Mom. I know I've been distant. It's just complicated. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. You'll understand." I listened to it 3 times. Each word felt like a promise carved into my heart. Vanessa thought she'd won, but I was still his mother, and a mother never forgets. If you felt her pain, give this story a like and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Who knows, someone nearby might be feeling the same. The door to room 3 creaked open with the sound of tired hinges and decades of disappointment. I stepped inside, still holding the photograph of Damon like it was a piece of him I could keep from slipping away. The air inside was stale, thick with mildew, the kind of smell that lingered in your clothes and settled in your lungs. I didn't bother turning on the light right away. I stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to the silence, letting the weight of it all press against my shoulders. The bedspread was a faded shade of blue with cigarette burns that looked like they'd been there longer than most of the guests. A single chair sat in the corner, its upholstery worn thin, and the television, an old boxy model, was bolted to the dresser. The motel didn't offer comfort. It offered vacancy, like me. I placed the photograph gently on the nightstand, still wrapped in the scarf that now bore a dark stain from my cut. My arm throbbed, the pain dull but persistent. I found the first aid kit under the bathroom sink, a plastic box with half-used supplies. I cleaned the wound with trembling hands, wincing as the alcohol bit into my skin. It wasn't deep, but it was angry, like me. Once I finished dressing it, I sat on the bed and stared at the carpet. Olive green, patched in places. I could feel every spring in the mattress pressing into my hips. Damon would have hated this place. He used to call motels sad stations, temporary spaces for people whose lives had taken a detour. He'd always said I deserved more, that he'd take care of me, that I'd never be alone. I let out a bitter breath. Promises like that should never be made out loud. A knock startled me. I froze, then approached the door cautiously. Peering through the peephole, I saw an older woman in a housecoat and slippers, holding 2 styrofoam cups. "Miss Ford?" she called out. I opened the door just enough to meet her eyes. Her face was kind, worn, the kind of face that's seen too many winters and not enough warmth. "I manage the front desk," she said, offering the cups. "Heard you had a rough morning. Brought some coffee. It's not fresh, but it's hot." I took one, nodding. "Thank you." "I'm Loretta," she said. "If you need anything extra, towels, directions, someone to talk to you, let me know." There was an ado, ever waited as a 6 minds as not. Her kindness chipped a little piece off the wall I'd started to build around myself. I managed a faint smile. "I appreciate it." Loretta left, and I closed the door. I sat by the window and sipped the coffee slowly. It tasted like burnt wood, but it was warm, and that was enough. I spent the next hour staring out at the parking lot. A rusty pickup truck sat 2 spaces down, and a crow pecked at something near the curb. My phone buzzed once. An email alert. I ignored it. If it wasn't from Damon, I didn't care. Eventually, I forced myself to unpack. Not because I planned to stay, but because I needed to feel like I was still functioning. My suitcase was poorly packed. Vanessa must have thrown everything in without care. One of my dresses was balled up beneath my walking shoes. I found a cracked makeup mirror I hadn't used in months and stared at the reflection. I looked older than I remembered. Grief aged me overnight. My eyes were red-rimmed, my cheeks sunken, and a bruise had started to bloom along my jaw where I'd hit the table. I touched it gently, then turned the mirror face down. I needed a plan. I couldn't sit here and drown in memories. I had to understand what happened to Damon. Vanessa's smug confession echoed in my head. I've been planning this for over a year. How? Why? What had she done behind his back? Had she manipulated him into changing documents? Was his death even an accident? I picked up my notebook from the suitcase. A simple spiral-bound pad. Damon had given it to me on my last birthday. "For your garden sketches," he'd said. But now, it would serve a different purpose. I wrote down everything I remembered from the past few weeks. The canceled lunches, the strange tone in Damon's voice, the way Vanessa had intercepted my calls. The voicemail, "Things are complicated." I underlined that phrase 3 times. I needed help. Someone who knew Damon's world better than I did. His lawyer? I remembered the name Lawrence Temple. Damon had trusted him. I hadn't met him in years, but I remembered his deep voice and patient manner. I picked up my phone and Googled the law firm, Temple and Grady, LLP, still in Atlanta. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. "Temple and Grady," a woman answered. "I need to speak with Mr. Temple," I said. "It's about my son, Damon Ford." There was a pause. "Please hold." The line clicked, and a soft piano melody played. I waited, heart racing. After a moment, a calm male voice came on the line. "Mrs. Ford," he said. "I was wondering when you might call." My breath caught. "You knew?" "I suspected," he said. "Damon left something with me, something he wanted kept private until the right time." "What kind of something?" I asked. "A letter," he said. "And a codicil." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "I think it's time we talked, Mrs. Ford," he said. "In person." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yes, I think it is." As I ended the call, I looked down at the photograph of Damon again. The crack in the glass ran right through his smile. But for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel powerless. I had questions, and I was going to get answers. The day of my son's funeral, I watched from across the street like a stranger, hidden behind the veil of my car's tinted windshield. The church steps were lined with white lilies. Damon hated lilies, said they smelled like hospitals in mourning, yet there they were, dozens of them, wilting under the Georgia sun like they didn't belong, just like me. Vanessa had made it clear, I was not welcome. No invitation, no call, not even a text with the address. I found out the time and place from a mutual friend who heard it from someone else, and even then, I wasn't sure I'd show. But how does a mother not attend her own child's funeral? So I sat there in the driver's seat of my 2008 Buick, the engine running, air conditioner humming, watching my son's life get buried without me. Vanessa wore black, of course, the perfect widow, designer sunglasses, sleek dress, hair pinned into a dignified bun. She clung to Leo's hand, guiding him up the steps like a stage director setting a scene. People surrounded her sympathetic hands on her back, soft condolences whispered into her ear. She soaked it in like applause. I counted at least 40 people. Friends, colleagues, neighbors. Even my old bridge partner, Dorothy, was there, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief like she'd lost a nephew. None of them seemed to wonder why I wasn't present. Or maybe they did, and assumed the worst. Vanessa had done her work well. I could only imagine the stories she'd spun, that I was unstable, that I couldn't handle my grief, that I chose not to come. I could see her now, leaning into some acquaintance's ear, voice low and pitying. She's just not well, poor thing. Damon always tried to help her, but sometimes you can't fix everything. She was rewriting our story in real time, and I was letting her. I sat there with my hands clenched in my lap, the bandage on my arm itching beneath my sleeve. I hadn't changed clothes since the day she pushed me out. I wore the same wrinkled blouse and long navy skirt, the same sensible shoes Damon once teased me about, said they made me look like someone's cranky Sunday school teacher. I smiled at the memory. Then the smile faded. When the service began, they closed the church doors. I imagined the sound of the organ swelling, the pastor's voice echoing through the sanctuary. I imagined the picture of Damon they would have displayed near the altar, the same one now cracked and bloodied in my motel room. My son was being eulogized by people who hadn't truly known him. They hadn't seen the way he used to cry at the end of sad movies or how he always sang off-key when he cooked breakfast. They didn't know he loved late-night walks or that he'd call me after every job site inspection just to say, "Still breathing, Mom." They didn't know the man. They knew the image Vanessa had curated. My hand found its way to the cross around my neck, a small gold charm Damon had given me on my 60th birthday. I clutched it, whispering a prayer not for his soul, but for the strength to carry the weight of his absence. When the doors opened again, the pallbearers emerged. Damon's casket was simple, dark mahogany with silver handles. Leo reached out to touch it, and Vanessa pulled him back, her face unreadable. They placed the casket in the hearse. The crowd followed behind it slowly, some crying, others solemn. No one noticed me. I waited until they were gone, until the church was empty and quiet again. Then I stepped out of the car and walked across the street. My knees ached with each step, the gravel biting into the soles of my shoes. I approached the steps but didn't enter. Instead, I stood there in silence, looking at the space my son had occupied only minutes earlier. There was a single flower left behind on the top step, a white lily. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. "It should have been roses," I murmured. I sat on the top step and looked out over the quiet street. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows, the kind of evening Damon used to love. He'd always said sunsets made everything look softer, even grief. I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook again. Flipping to a fresh page, I wrote, Day 2 without Damon. She kept me from his goodbye. My hand trembled slightly as I added, I won't let her control the rest of his story. I stayed there until dusk, then walked slowly back to my car. That night, back in room 3, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Vanessa's voice, You're not family anymore. But the photo on my nightstand said otherwise. He was my son. And I was still his mother. I woke before dawn to the sound of trucks growling down the highway, their headlights slicing through the thin curtains of room 3. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the ache in my arm reminded me. The motel. The push. The broken glass. The truth Vanessa had spit at me with a smile. I sat up slowly, letting my feet find the cold floor. My body felt older this morning, heavier. Grief does that, it settles into your joints like damp weather. I made a cup of motel coffee from the machine bolted to the counter. It tasted like rust and regret, but it was something to hold while I gathered myself. Lawrence Temple's words echoed in my mind. A letter. And a codicil. Damon had left something behind. Not for Vanessa. For me. I dressed carefully, choosing clean clothes that still smelled faintly of my old house. I braided my hair the way Damon liked it, said it made me look steady, like nothing could knock me over. I needed that steadiness now. The law office was across town, in a quiet building of glass and brick that looked like it had never known desperation. I took the bus. The driver nodded when I paid my fare, the small kindness of routine grounding me. As we passed familiar streets, memories rose uninvited Damon at 12, riding his bike too fast. Damon at 25, calling to say he'd landed his first big contract. Damon at 38, tired but proud, telling me he'd finally made it. We stopped in front of the building. I stepped off, smoothed my blouse, and walked inside. Lawrence Temple met me in the lobby. He had aged since I'd last seen him silver at the temples, lines at the corners of his eyes, but his posture was the same. Straight, deliberate, a man who measured words before spending them. Mrs. Ford, he said softly, taking my hand. I'm sorry I couldn't do more sooner. You did what Damon asked, I replied. My voice held, barely. He led me to his office. It smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place where decisions lived longer than people. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door. Before we begin, he said, I need to be clear. What Damon left is legal, properly executed, but it changes things. I folded my hands in my lap. Vanessa says everything belongs to her. Lawrence's mouth tightened. Vanessa says many things. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. My heart thudded painfully. This is the letter, he said, setting it between us. Written in Damon's hand, dated 3 weeks before his death. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. I unfolded the paper slowly, afraid that if I rushed, the words might vanish. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say everything I needed to. I'm sorry for that. I've been trying to fix a mess I helped create, and I didn't want to worry you until I had answers. I stopped, pressed my lips together, then continued. Vanessa and I aren't what we look like from the outside. There are things she doesn't know I know. Things about money, about decisions made without my consent. I've been documenting everything, and I've left copies with Lawrence. If something happens to me, I need you to trust him. Tears blurred the page. I wiped them away and read on. Most of all, I need you to remember this. You are not weak. You taught me to stand up straight and tell the truth, even when it costs me. If I fail to do that, I hope you won't. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Lawrence cleared his throat. There's more. He slid another document across the desk. This is the codicil, an amendment to Damon's will. I scanned the first page, my pulse quickening. It wasn't long, but every word carried weight. Damon changed his will? I asked. He added a contingency, Lawrence said. One that activates under specific circumstances. What circumstances? He met my eyes. Fraud, concealment of assets, bad faith. I let out a shaky breath. Vanessa. Yes. My mind raced back to her smug confidence, the way she'd already spent the money in her head. She thinks she's untouchable. That's common, Lawrence said quietly. Right before a fall. He explained the structure carefully, patiently, as if I were a student and this were a lesson that might save my life. The codicil didn't strip Vanessa of everything outright. It did something more precise. It froze certain transfers, required disclosures, triggered a review if any attempt was made to liquidate assets before probate. "And the house?" I asked. "The house is complicated," Lawrence said, "but not in the way Vanessa believes." He paused, then added, "I need you to be prepared. She will move fast. People who think they've won often do." I nodded slowly. "What do I do?" "For now," he said, "nothing visible. You let her believe you're beaten. You stay small, quiet. I have predict. I thought of the motel room, the $100 check, the brochure for Shady Pines. I thought of the way she'd laughed. "I can do quiet," I said. "I've been doing it my whole life." Lawrence's eyes softened. "Good, because when the time comes, quiet will be your strength." I left the office with copies tucked carefully into my bag. Outside, the sun had risen fully now, bright and unforgiving. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting it warm my face. Vanessa thought the story was over. It wasn't. It was just beginning. I returned to the house the following morning. Not for confrontation, not for revenge. I went back for Damon, his photo, his journals, the pieces of him that still lived between the walls of that home. Vanessa might have controlled the locks, but she didn't control the memories, and she certainly didn't own his soul. I arrived just before sunrise, while the sky was still bruised with night. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the soft hum of sprinklers and the distant bark of a dog. My old house, Damon's house, looked the same, yet didn't feel the same. The blinds were drawn. The garden I once tended had weeds creeping through the edges. Vanessa had let it go wild, just like everything else she touched. I parked 2 houses down and waited. At 6:45 a.m., like clockwork, Vanessa's garage door groaned open. She backed out in her silver SUV, hair pulled into that same severe bun, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Leo sat in the back seat, swinging his legs, a stuffed dinosaur clutched to his chest. I watched as she drove off. She didn't even glance at the house in her rear view. When the street was clear, I stepped out, pulled my scarf tighter, and made my way to the side entrance. I still had the key Damon gave me years ago. Vanessa had likely changed the main lock, but I doubted she remembered the one on the laundry room door. Damon was meticulous about details. Vanessa? She was only meticulous about appearances. I slipped inside. The scent hit me first, her perfume, sharp and artificial, layered over stale air and something faintly chemical. The furniture had been rearranged, family photos removed. No trace of me on the walls, or even Damon, really. It looked like a catalog now. All surface, no soul. I moved carefully through the house, feet silent on the hardwood. I passed the living room, where Damon and I once danced to old Marvin Gaye records on rainy afternoons. I passed the kitchen, where he made me pancakes every Mother's Day, even after he got married. Upstairs, I found his office. It was locked. I stood there for a moment, hand on the doorknob. Then I remembered the loose hinge at the bottom. Damon had always meant to fix it. I knelt, slid a thin letter opener from my coat pocket, and wedged it under the panel. A few tugs, and the door popped open with a soft click. Inside, the room was just as he'd left it, untouched, neglected. Dust covered the shelves, but the smell of old books and printer ink brought me to my knees. His desk. I opened drawers, one by one. Files, receipts, sketches of home designs, some with my name scribbled in the margins, Mom's Dream Garden, Phase 3. Then I found the journal. A black leather-bound notebook tucked beneath a folder labeled Assets, Pending Review. Damon's handwriting covered every page in neat, slanted lines. I sat in his chair and began to read. I don't trust her anymore. She moved $12,000 from the joint account last month. Told me it was for repairs. There are no repairs. Lawrence says to keep documentation. I'm doing that. But it's hard pretending not to know. Leo asked me why Mommy is always angry. I had no answer. End quote. Each entry cut deeper than the last. If anything happens to me, Mom will know what to do. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. I copied as much as I could onto my notepad, snapping quick photos with my phone. I didn't have time to take everything. I didn't want to tip her off, But I needed proof that Damon had seen her, that he hadn't gone blind into the dark. I was just about to leave when I heard the garage door. My blood froze. She was back. I grabbed the journal, stuffed it under my coat, and crept down the back stairwell. I slipped out through the laundry room door just as the SUV turned into the driveway. I ducked behind the neighbor's fence, heart pounding, clutching Damon's words against my chest. She parked, got out, slammed the door. Leo's voice carried, "Mommy, I'm hungry." Her answer was a clipped, "We'll eat when I say so." I stayed crouched until she was inside. Then I walked back to my car. It wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about truth, about Damon's voice being heard, even in death. That night, I sat at the motel desk, transcribing every note, organizing every file. I emailed scanned pages to Lawrence. I knew the codicil mattered, but now we had more. A pattern, a paper trail. And still, part of me hoped I was wrong, that Damon had misunderstood her. That grief wasn't tainted by betrayal. But the entries said otherwise. So did my gut. Vanessa had worn that smile too easily. She had erased me without a blink, and now she was trying to erase Damon too. But not on my watch. I slipped the journal under my pillow before I went to sleep, as if I could protect it, as if protecting it would somehow bring him closer. Tomorrow, we would take the next step. We would make her answer for what she'd done. The morning began with rain. Not the kind that lashes windows or floods streets, but the soft kind, the kind that taps gently on rooftops and blurs the world into something quieter, more bearable. I stood outside room 3 beneath the narrow awning, holding my second cup of motel coffee. The steam rose weakly, but it gave my hands something to do. Last night had been long. I barely slept. Between rereading Damon's journal and typing notes for Lawrence, my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept hearing Vanessa's voice, the sound of glass breaking, and my son's soft, worried words from his final voicemail. "It's complicated. I'll explain everything soon." But he never got the chance. Now it was up to me. I returned inside and sat at the desk again, the worn wood creaking under my weight. I had laid out every page of Damon's notes, every bank transfer I could trace, every passive-aggressive email she'd sent him. The timeline was starting to take shape. Over the course of the past year, Vanessa had moved funds quietly, opened an LLC, transferred ownership of a few small investments into her name. Nothing huge, not enough to raise alarms on its own, but Damon had caught on, and he'd started documenting it. Lawrence had called the night before after reviewing the scans. "This changes everything," he'd said. "Her pattern, the deception, it strengthens the codicil's enforcement, will freeze the estate motion." Eincrows. I'd exhaled, my whole body trembling with the relief of being believed. Now, Lawrence needed me to make a formal statement. Sworn. Attached to the codicil and the supporting documents. We scheduled it for 2 p.m. today. That gave me 4 hours. I got dressed in my best blouse, the cream-colored one with the pearl buttons. Damon bought me one Christmas when he'd said, "You deserve to feel elegant every day." I added a navy cardigan, the cross necklace, and tied my scarf over the healing cut on my arm. Before I left, I tucked Damon's photograph into my handbag. The cracked glass had been removed, the photo wiped clean. I couldn't walk into that law office without him. The rain had thinned to mist by the time I reached the firm. Temple and Grady's receptionist greeted me with a soft smile, as if she already knew the weight I was carrying. Lawrence led me into a private conference room this time, quiet, windowless, a heavy oak table in the center. There was a recording device, a notary present, and an air of gravity that made me straighten my spine without thinking. He spoke gently. "Mrs. Ford, I need you to speak clearly and from the heart. This statement will be entered as your sworn affidavit." I nodded. "I understand." He hit record. I began. "I, Geneva Marie Ford, mother of the late Damon Lee Ford, hereby submit this statement to support the codicil filed by my son prior to his death." The words spilled out, one by one, like stepping stones across a river I hadn't wanted to cross. I described the days leading to the funeral, Vanessa's behavior, her refusal to let me grieve, her coldness, the physical altercation, the fall into Damon's photograph. Then I described what I had found in the house, the journal, the bank documents, the LLCs. I recited her own words, the ones that had burned into my brain. "I've been planning this for over a year." When I was done, there was silence. The notary cleared her throat and said quietly, "Please sign at the bottom." My signature shook slightly, but I pressed hard. I wanted the ink to stay. Afterward, Lawrence placed the statement into a manila folder and locked it in a drawer. "This gives us enough to act. She won't be able to touch a dime until the court reviews this." Activant. I let out a long breath. "And if she fights it?" "She will," he said. "But now she has to fight the truth." He leaned forward. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "No," I admitted. "But I wasn't ready to bury my son either." He nodded once. "Then let's move forward." On the way out, I stopped by the receptionist's desk to ask about printing a few more pages of Damon's entries. While I waited, I overheard part of a phone conversation she was having. "Yes, someone came by this morning asking for copies of the will," she said into the receiver. "But Mr. Temple wasn't in at the time." I tensed. The receptionist looked up, covered the receiver, and mouthed, "Excuse me just a moment." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Who asked about the will?" She glanced at her notes. "Woman, tall, mid-30s, black blazer. Said her name was Vanessa Ford." "Of course she did. She said it was urgent," the receptionist added, hesitant. I thanked her, forced a smile, and walked briskly out the door. Vanessa was rattled. She sensed movement. She was sniffing around, trying to control the narrative before it slipped through her fingers. She wouldn't go down quietly, which meant I needed to prepare for what came next. That night, I returned to the motel and placed Damon's journal back beneath my pillow. I sat in the same chair by the window, watching the rain start up again, heavier this time. It pounded the roof like a warning. She was coming, and this time, I would be ready. It happened just after midnight. A knock, sharp, precise, too calm for emergency, too firm for hesitation. I was already awake, sitting in the motel chair with Damon's journal open in my lap. The television flickered quietly in the background, some late-night documentary on forgotten cities I hadn't been watching. I was listening to the silence, reading between Damon's lines, trying to understand how the boy I raised ended up surrounded by shadows. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. I didn't move. Not at first. Then a voice followed, muffled, but unmistakable. "Geneva, open the door." "Vanessa." I rose carefully, heart pounding, and stepped toward the door. I didn't speak. I didn't touch the knob. She knocked again. Firmer. "I know you're in there. I saw your car." Still, I said nothing. "I'm not here to fight," she said, her tone sweetened artificially. "I just want to talk." "Talk?" I glanced around the room. The bed was unmade. My scarf with the bloodstain lay across the chair. Damon's photo sat on the nightstand. I grabbed the journal and slid it into the drawer. Then I unlocked the door but left the chain in place. I opened it just wide enough to see her. She looked different. No heels, no makeup, no sculpted hair. Just jeans, a gray hoodie, and eyes ringed with exhaustion. But that didn't make her harmless. "Talk," I said through the gap. Vanessa folded her arms. "You've been busy." I said nothing. "You think you're smart. You think you've got this whole game figured out." I still said nothing. She leaned closer. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know enough to make you nervous," I replied quietly. Her nostrils flared. "I came here to give you a chance, to stop this before it goes public, before people start digging into things they don't understand. Before the court starts asking questions Damon would have asked if he were still alive?" I asked. Her expression tightened. "I have Leo to think about," she said. "He's my son." "He's Damon's son," I corrected. "And Damon's watching now every move you make." She blinked. "Just once." Then smiled. "You always had a flair for drama," she said. "No wonder he couldn't stand being around you for more than a few hours." "He's Devon a treat with men." That one hurt. Not because I believed it, but because I knew she said it to wound. And it almost worked. I closed the door an inch. "Wait," she snapped. Her hand touched the edge of the door. "You want to fight me? Fine. But understand this. I'm not afraid of you. I've built everything I have from scratch. Damon was a stepping stone, not a foundation. And if you try to tear this down, I will bury you in paperwork and court fees until you forget what day it is." There it was. Her real face. I stared into her eyes. "I already buried my son. Nothing else scares me." She held my gaze for 1 second too long, then stepped back. "This is war now," she said coldly. And I don't lose. She turned and walked away, her sneakers silent against the wet pavement. I closed the door, locked every bolt, and stood with my back pressed against it, shaking. It had begun. The next morning, I met Lawrence in his office. I recounted the visit, every word, every look. She's rattled, he said, and reckless. That's good. She threatened legal hell. He nodded. Let her. She'll walk straight into the fire herself. We moved fast, filed motions, reinforced the codicil, requested subpoenas on account records she thought were invisible. We initiated a full review of Damon's estate, one that couldn't be paused without judicial approval. Vanessa would receive a formal notice within 48 hours. She would scream. She would claw. But she couldn't undo the paper trail Damon left. That night, back in room 3, I sat down with Leo's birthday card. Damon had bought it early, always the planner. It had been tucked in the back of his desk drawer with a tiny action figure he meant to wrap. I had found it the day I snuck into the house. I opened the card. It was blank, but Damon had written something in the corner. To my boy. May you always see the truth, even when it hurts. Tears fell silently onto my lap. I wasn't fighting Vanessa for vengeance. I was fighting for the truth. For Leo. For Damon. For the woman I used to be before grief and betrayal knocked me off balance. The storm had come, but I was still standing. 2 days after Vanessa's midnight visit, the legal notice reached her. Lawrence called me the moment the delivery was confirmed. She'll go quiet for a day or two, he warned, not because she's calm, but because she's calculating. He wasn't wrong. By the third morning, I found an envelope slipped under the door of room 3. No stamp, no address, just my name, scrawled in ink that looked like it was scratched into the paper out of spite. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. On it, in bold black letters, "You've made a huge mistake. Watch your step. This is your last warning." No signature, no return address, but I didn't need one. The scent of her perfume lingered on the paper, sharp and synthetic, like dried roses and bleach. I stared at the note for a full minute before folding it and sliding it into Damon's journal. Let it sit next to the truth. That afternoon, Vanessa made her next move. Lawrence texted, "Check your email." It started. I opened the file he'd sent screenshots of a social media post, already spreading. Vanessa had given a statement to a local lifestyle blog, the kind that specialized in inspirational widow profiles and clickbait sympathy. The headline read, "Young widow battles greedy mother-in-law over late husband's will." Beneath it was a photo of Vanessa and Leo in a park, staged to look candid, Leo swinging, Vanessa gazing wistfully into the distance. The article painted me as a bitter old woman who couldn't let go, who was obsessed with control and estranged from her son. Vanessa was heartbroken, just trying to protect what's left for her child. I felt the bile rise in my throat. There were quotes, fabricated ones. "She never liked me," Vanessa supposedly said. Damon spent years trying to manage her temper. My temper? They even quoted a supposed family friend who said I once threatened to burn down the house if Damon didn't break up with Vanessa. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, so wildly disconnected from reality. It felt like satire. But people believed it. Comments flooded in. Poor woman. That mill sounds toxic. It said it'd be indifferent. Always the older generation trying to steal the next one's future. She should be ashamed of herself. Let your son rest. Shame. That was Vanessa's weapon now. She couldn't erase Damon's journal or undo the codicil, so she would try to discredit me, turn me into a caricature, a vengeful matriarch, hungry for money and attention. I sat in silence for a long time, then reached for my phone. I didn't call Lawrence. I called my niece. "Cassandra," I said when she answered, "I need a favor." She was a tech-savvy woman in her early 30s, headstrong and sharp-eyed, always 2 steps ahead of her peers. Damon adored her. I forwarded the article. She whistled. "Wow, that woman doesn't pull punches. Can you find out who owns the blog? Who published this?" "Already on it," she said. "And I can do you one better. You want to tell your side?" "I do." "Good. I'll write it with you. I've got friends in journalism, real journalism." 2 days later, we published a response. Not on a gossip blog, on a trusted local newspaper's op-ed column. The headline was simple: "A mother's voice. The truth about my son, my grandson, and the woman who cut me out. It was my words, my voice, my story. I described Damon, the boy who once stood up to bullies on the playground, the teenager who worked double shifts in high school to buy me a better stove, the man who called me every Friday just to say he was okay. I described the hurt, the funeral I wasn't allowed to attend, the moment I was pushed out of the only home that still held his scent, the journal he left behind. We didn't mention Vanessa by name. We didn't need to. The truth had its own gravity. The response was immediate. Some still doubted me, but others, especially women, began to comment, to write in, to say, "I see you. I've been you. Keep going." I read every comment, every line. And when the tears came, they weren't just grief, they were release. Vanessa had started a fire she couldn't control. Because now, I wasn't the only one carrying the truth. The next morning, Cassandra called. "You've got momentum," she said. "Use it," Lawrence agreed. "Let's press forward. Her narrative is breaking. Time to file the motion to freeze asset transfers. Public support will help." I nodded. "Let's move." But before we hung up, he added, "One more thing. You may want to speak with your grandson. He's been asking questions." I froze. "Leo?" I whispered. "Yes," Lawrence said gently, "and he deserves answers." That night, I sat by the motel window again, rain tapping lightly on the glass, but my thoughts were with a boy who didn't understand why his grandmother disappeared from his life overnight. Leo. He was the one Vanessa hadn't counted on. He remembered me. He loved me. And now, he was old enough to ask why I was gone. That changed everything. It was no longer just about Damon's truth. It was about the future Damon left behind. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry in the motel room, simple things, borrowed things, a blouse a church friend had dropped off, slacks Cassandra had bought for me at a thrift store down the road. I didn't hear the phone ring at first. It buzzed twice on the nightstand before I noticed the screen. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something tugged at me. "Hello?" I said, cautious. There was a long pause. Then a small voice. "Grandma?" My breath caught. "Leo?" I whispered. A soft rustle, then, "Yeah, it's me." I sank slowly onto the bed, the unfolded blouse slipping from my lap. My heart raced. "Baby, how did you... Where are you?" "I'm in my room," he said quietly. "I stole Mommy's phone. She's taking a nap." Minus. A million questions flooded my mind about how he got the number, if he'd be caught, but I swallowed them. All that mattered was that I was hearing his voice. "I miss you," he said, his voice trembling. "You didn't come to Daddy's funeral." Tears burned my eyes. "I wanted to, sweetheart. I wanted to be there more than anything. Mommy said you were too mad, that you didn't care." I gripped the phone tighter. Vanessa's lies knew no boundaries. "That's not true," I said, steady but soft. "I loved your daddy with all my heart. I still do. I didn't come because sometimes grown-ups make decisions that are wrong even when they think they're right." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you mad at Mommy?" I didn't answer right away. How do you explain betrayal to a child without shattering their world? "I'm not mad at you," I said instead. "And I never stopped loving you. Do you believe me?" A small sniffle. "Yes." I closed my eyes, holding back the wave of emotion. "Can I see you?" he asked. "I want to," I said, voice shaking. "I'm trying, but your mommy doesn't want me to. Not right now." "Why?" "Because she and I don't agree on what your daddy wanted." Another pause. "Daddy said you were his best friend." I choked back a sob. "I was, baby. And he was mine," he whispered. "I have his sweater. I sleep with it sometimes. It smells like him." I pressed my hand over my heart. "Keep it close, Leo. That sweater holds pieces of him. And so do you." End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. He hesitated again. Then quietly, almost inaudibly, "I heard Mommy yelling. She said you were going to take our house." I inhaled slowly. "No, Leo, I'm not trying to take your house. I'm trying to protect what your daddy wanted. For you, for me, for all of us." "But Mommy said you're lying." "I'm not." The silence after that felt heavier than anything he'd said. Then I heard a door creak on his end. "Leo?" I whispered. "I have to go," he said, his voice panicked. She's waking up. 2 a.m. Okay, baby, just one thing. What? If you ever feel scared or unsure or like something isn't right, you can call me. Anytime. But what if she finds out? Then I'll still be here, waiting. Loving you. He hesitated, then whispered, I love you too. The line went dead. I stared at the phone long after the screen went dark, my heart pounding with 1,000 emotions I couldn't name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But most of all, I wanted to hold my grandson and tell him he wasn't crazy for noticing that the world around him had started to tilt. That night, I called Lawrence. He reached out, I said. Leo, he called me. Lawrence exhaled. She's going to lose it. She already has, I replied, but now she knows I'm not invisible. He was quiet a moment. Then, are you ready to take the next step? I am. We began preparing for the preliminary injunction hearing. It would be public, on record. Vanessa would be forced to present her side under oath. She'd have to justify her financial transfers, her actions, her timeline, and if she slipped even once, her story would unravel. But more than that, I had a new reason to fight. Leo. He wasn't just a piece of Damon. He was a witness, a heartbeat in the middle of all this damage, and whether he understood everything or not, he was watching. He deserved better than silence. He deserved the truth, and I was going to give it to him. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not just the air conditioning or the marble floors, it was the atmosphere. Sterile, distant, designed for order, not for grief. People spoke in hushed tones, as if louder voices might crack the polished walls and let something raw spill through. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom 4B, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Lawrence sat beside me, flipping through a folder filled with neatly tabbed documents, Damon's codicil, his journal excerpts, the financial records we had traced. My eyes drifted across the room, and there she was, Vanessa. She walked in like it was a runway. Hair pressed flat, dress cinched perfectly at the waist, heels sharp enough to kill a rumor in one step. She had makeup on, not too much, just enough to look like a grieving widow pulled together by sheer strength of character. Behind her was a man I didn't recognize, tall, lean, with a tight jaw and a clipboard, probably her lawyer. Or her new business partner. Damon had warned about a man named Marcus in his journal, quiet, clever, always hovering at the edge of deals that didn't make sense. She looked at me once, just once, and smiled. The kind of smile that said, you may have the truth, but I have the stage. The bailiff opened the doors. All parties for Ford versus Ford estate. Please enter courtroom 4B. Anavest. We rose. As I walked past Vanessa, I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Not from shame, not from fear, from resolve. This was for Damon. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s, gray bob, glasses low on her nose, voice sharp and efficient. She introduced the nature of the hearing, a petition to freeze the estate assets pending review of a contested codicil and concerns of financial misconduct. Lawrence spoke first. His voice was steady, clear. He presented the codicil, explained Damon's intent, and provided an overview of the records, questionable withdrawals, asset transfers, the sudden shift in property titles. Then he handed the court a printed excerpt from Damon's journal. I watched as the judge read it. Her expression didn't change, but something in the room shifted. Then, it was Vanessa's turn. Her lawyer, Marcus, as I guessed, stood and launched into a performance. That's all it was, a performance. My client, he began, has endured unimaginable grief. To suggest she would exploit her husband's death is not only unfounded, it's cruel. He painted me as a bitter, estranged mother, clinging to the scraps of a son she no longer truly knew. He called the codicil convenient, the journal unverified, and the financial transfers common spousal adjustments in anticipation of a family trust. Then Vanessa took the stand. I didn't think they'd let her speak, but she insisted. I loved Damon, she said, voice thick with rehearsed sorrow. We had our struggles, like any couple, but he was my partner. She glanced at me. The crocodile tears came right on cue. Geneva never liked me. She always thought I wasn't good enough. She made Damon choose between us. The judge tilted her head. And the financial records? I moved money to protect our family, Vanessa said. We were planning for Leo's future. Damon knew. He approved. Lawrence rose. With respect, Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary, including Damon's own words. He presented a copy of the journal. Vanessa stiffened. I'd like to read an excerpt, Lawrence said. The judge nodded. He read, She thinks I don't see it, but I do. The account transfers. The way she manipulates Leo's school funds. I'm not just worried about the money. I'm worried about who she's becoming. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Her lawyer stood to object. Overruled. Then came the final blow. Lawrence pulled out one last document. A digital log showing the journal's creation date, backup timestamps, and a notarized copy Damon had left with Lawrence's firm a month before his death. Authenticated, Lawrence said. The judge sat back. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just nodded slowly. I'm granting the injunction, she said. Effective immediately, all estate assets are to be frozen. Any attempt to alter or transfer them will be considered a violation of court order. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. But it was done. We'd stopped the bleeding. The courtroom emptied slowly. Vanessa stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots down the corridor. I didn't follow. I didn't look back. Instead, I stepped outside. The air was crisp. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Lawrence joined me on the steps. You did it, he said quietly. No, I replied. Damon did. I just carried it across the line. He handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. A letter. From your grandson. My heart leapt. I opened it carefully, hands trembling. Inside, scrawled in crooked handwriting, were the words, Grandma, I miss you. Daddy said the truth matters. I believe you. Love, Leo. Tears slipped down my cheeks. And this time, I let them fall. Because the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was growing quietly, steadily in the heart of the boy Damon left behind. 3 days after the hearing, I stood outside Leo's school. I hadn't been near a playground in years. Not since Damon was little. The sound of laughter, the clatter of plastic slides, the shrill calls of teachers corralling children, it all felt like a memory trying to breathe again. Lawrence had made the arrangements quietly. The court order hadn't granted me full visitation rights yet, but the judge had allowed a supervised meeting. 1 hour, on school grounds, neutral territory. Vanessa had objected, of course. But for once, she didn't win. Leo's teacher, Miss Byrne, waited at the gate. She was kind-eyed, probably in her late 40s, with a gentle voice and strong presence. She greeted me with a nod. He's inside, she said softly. He's been asking for this all week. I swallowed hard and nodded. When I stepped into the classroom, everything else fell away. There he was, my grandson. Leo sat cross-legged on a rug near the reading corner, building a spaceship out of red and yellow Legos. His curls were longer now, and his face had thinned a little since I'd last held him. But his eyes, Damon's eyes, lit up the moment he saw me. Grandma! He dropped the Legos and ran to me, arms flung wide. I crouched and caught him, squeezing him so tight I thought I might never let go. My tears fell into his hair. I missed you so much, he mumbled into my shoulder. I missed you more, I whispered. More than anything. We sat together in a quiet corner of the classroom while the teacher hovered at a respectful distance. I brought out the small photo of Damon I'd tucked into my purse. It was the one from his college graduation, the one Leo had never seen. Your daddy looked just like you when he was little, I said. Leo stared at the photo, his fingers tracing the edges. He said I'd be brave one day, he said. Like him. You already are, I told him. So much braver than you know. He looked up at me, brows furrowed. Why doesn't Mommy like you? I hesitated, then gave the only answer I could. Sometimes people are scared of the truth, and sometimes when they're scared, they try to keep others away. But that doesn't mean the love goes away. Not ever. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he whispered, I want you to come back home. End quote. My heart broke open all over again. I want that too, sweetheart. But for now, this seeing you here, holding your hand, that's enough. It's more than enough. He nodded, trying to be strong. But I saw the corners of his mouth tremble. I pulled something from my coat pocket, a small notebook with a navy blue cover. This is yours now, I said. It's just for you. You can draw in it, write your stories, or tell your daddy about your day, whatever you want. That's 7 days. He flipped through the blank pages, eyes wide. Can I write to you too? You can, and I'll write back. It was a small thing, but it was a bridge, and bridges were all I had left to build. Our hour passed too quickly. Miss Byrne gave us a soft warning, and Leo hugged me one last time before returning to his classmates. I stayed until he disappeared into the crowd of laughing children, clutching the notebook to his chest like it was something sacred. Back outside, the sun was warm on my face. I stood by the fence a moment longer, listening to the echoes of his laughter, before turning to go. As I walked back to the car, I saw a figure leaning against a silver SUV at the far end of the parking lot. Vanessa. She wasn't smiling this time. She wore dark sunglasses, arms crossed, jaw tight. I could feel her gaze tracking my every step. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. She got her hour with him every day. I'd had mine, and I wasn't about to waste a second of it feeding her rage. Later that night, I found a folded note slid under my motel door again. I opened it cautiously. This one wasn't a threat. It was written in Leo's uneven handwriting. Thank you for today. I'm going to draw Daddy's spaceship. You said he loved stars. I think he's watching me from one. I pressed the note to my lips. This fight had taken so much already, but it hadn't taken Leo. Not yet. And as long as I still had him, I still had a reason to keep going. I hadn't been back to Damon's house since the night Vanessa pushed me out. The porch light had flickered behind me as I stumbled into the darkness, bleeding and broken, clutching a shattered frame of my son's face. That night had marked the end of what I thought was family. But today, it marked the beginning of something else. The court order secured by Lawrence's relentless work granted us temporary access to the property for documentation and retrieval of Damon's personal effects. Vanessa, predictably, had fought it with everything she had. But the judge had spoken. I was allowed 3 hours. With supervision. I arrived at the house just after 10, accompanied by a court-appointed officer and Lawrence's assistant, Jenna. Vanessa wasn't present. Her lawyer had advised her to avoid the confrontation, likely fearing she'd unravel under scrutiny again. Part of me was relieved. Another part wanted to see her face when the truth finally rose from the dust. The house looked exactly the same, immaculate, lifeless. The lawn was trimmed to perfection, the windows gleamed, but something about it felt wrong, like a shell dressed up to hide decay. We stepped inside. The scent hit me first, faint lavender cleaner, beneath which lingered the familiar warmth of old wood, Damon's cologne, and the faintest trace of lemon from the dish soap he always bought. I walked slowly through the rooms. The living room still had the gray couch he'd chosen after their wedding. The bookshelves were mostly untouched, lined with architecture books, old National Geographics, and a few mystery novels he'd devoured during Leo's nap times. Then I entered his office. The same desk, same corkboard, same dusty corner where Leo used to play with his train set while Damon worked late into the night. But there was something new, a small, locked cabinet against the far wall. "Do you have the key?" Jenna asked. I shook my head. "He never locked things. That's not his handwriting on the label." The officer nodded. "We're authorized to open it." Inside were folders, dozens of them. Tax forms, legal correspondence, real estate transfer documents, all dated within the last 18 months. All in Vanessa's name. But the signature fields, some were his, some were not. Jenna narrowed her eyes. "These two look at the handwriting. It doesn't match the others." "Are you saying these were forged?" I asked quietly. "I'm saying we need a forensic expert." She took photos, bagged the documents. My hands were trembling. We moved next to the master bedroom. I didn't linger. The bed was neatly made, pillows stacked like a display window. Soulless. And then I saw the hallway ladder, the attic. Damon had always joked that attics were grief closets, where families stored the things they couldn't face but couldn't throw away. I hadn't been up there in years, maybe never. The officer pulled the string, and the stairs creaked down. A wave of heat and dust hit us as we climbed. The attic was small, lined with wooden beams and low ceilings. Light filtered in from a small window, boxes stacked neatly along the far wall. Most were labeled with Sharpie, Xmas, baby clothes, Damon College. But one box caught my eye. No label, just taped shut, shoved in the corner like an afterthought. I reached for it, heart pounding. Inside, photos, journals, a VHS tape, and a velvet box. I pulled the tape out. It was labeled in Damon's handwriting. "If anything happens to me, Geneva, watch this." My hands went cold. We didn't have a VHS player, but Jenna snapped a photo of the label, carefully placed the tape in a padded envelope. Then I opened the velvet box. Inside was a wedding ring, not Vanessa's, and a note. This belonged to her. I kept it to remember the truth. I stared at it for a long time, unsure of what I was seeing. "Her who?" Jenna asked softly. There was no answer, just the silence of a man long gone, leaving clues like breadcrumbs through a forest of lies. Back downstairs, I took one final look at the house. Every room felt different now, not just haunted, hijacked. Vanessa had built her story with surgical precision, but Damon had known. He'd known something was coming. He'd tried to leave a trail. And now I had pieces he didn't have time to finish placing. Back at the motel, Cassandra tracked down a service with a working VHS player. That night, we played the tape. And Damon appeared on the screen. He sat in his office, face tired, voice calm. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain." I leaned forward, breath held. I made mistakes. But the biggest one was trusting the wrong person for too long. He paused, swallowed hard. "She's not who she says she is. The things I've found, the things I've seen her do. I should have acted sooner. But I kept hoping she'd change." The screen flickered. "If anything happens to me, please, protect Leo. Keep him away from her lies. And Mom, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to clean up this mess. But I know you'll do it better than anyone." The tape ended. I sat in silence. No tears. Just clarity. The attic had hidden the final piece. And now, the storm Vanessa had built was coming straight for her. The next morning, I awoke to find another envelope pushed under my door. But this one was different. No threats. No Leo's crooked handwriting. Just my name, typed in clean, formal font, like a business memo. I hesitated before opening it. My hands were still shaky from the night before. Damon's face on that tape hadn't left me. His voice had followed me into sleep. It felt like he was still in the room, watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. I peeled the envelope open. Inside was a printed email draft. Not sent, just typed. Subject: Transfer of primary holdings, urgent. It was addressed to a law firm in Atlanta, one Vanessa hadn't mentioned before. A firm known for private, high-value asset reallocations, and beneath her name the words, "Please proceed with liquidation of all joint accounts. The timeline has moved up unexpectedly. I need everything secured under my name before questions arise." No signature, no goodbye, just business. But it was dated. 1 week before Damon's death. My stomach turned. She had been planning to strip the estate before the accident, not after. Not out of grief, or panic, or desperation. This was calculated, planned, maybe even timed. I showed the email to Lawrence. "She slipped," he said. "Someone in her camp has doubts, or guilt, or both. We can use this." Combined with the tape? The false signatures? It's enough for a criminal referral. I froze. Criminal. The word echoed. I'd been walking this path slowly, piece by piece. Grief, then resistance, then investigation. But this was something else. We weren't just defending Damon's legacy anymore. We were entering a war over the truth itself. By afternoon, Lawrence had filed the new evidence with the court. The judge responded faster than expected. A formal inquiry was ordered into the handling of Damon's finances in the 6 months leading to his death. Vanessa was now officially under investigation. That night, Cassandra knocked on my door holding a thumb drive. "The media's picking up the story," she said, breathless. I uploaded the tape to a private link, sent it to a few journalists I trust. I sat down, staring at the small drive in her hand. It looked so ordinary, but it held a voice that could no longer speak for itself. Cassandra hesitated. "Are you okay?" I looked up at her. "I'm tired," I said, "but I'm ready." She nodded. Then her phone buzzed. "It's Leo's school," she said, confused. "They're calling me?" I stood instantly. Something was wrong. Cassandra put the call on speaker. "Miss Ford?" the voice on the other end said. "Are you a relative of Leo Ford?" "Yes," Cassandra replied. "I'm his cousin. "We're sorry to call, but Leo didn't get picked up today. We've tried calling his mother. No answer." My heart nearly stopped. "He's still there?" I asked sharply. "Yes," the woman said, nervous. "He's with his teacher. But he said he was supposed to go home with his grandma today, that she was coming to get him." I looked at Cassandra, then grabbed my keys. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the school parking lot. Leo sat on a bench near the front office, his backpack beside him, clutching the notebook I'd given him like it was a shield. He looked up and smiled. "I knew you'd come," he said. I hugged him tightly, too tightly. "What happened?" I asked. "Did your mom say I'd pick you up?" He looked confused. "She left this morning and didn't come back. She said she had a meeting. I waited, but..." The front desk woman came out. "We're required to report this," she said gently. "This isn't the first time, but it's the first time Leo mentioned any concerns." I met Cassandra's eyes. This was it, the moment we'd been waiting for. That night, with Lawrence's help, I filed for emergency temporary custody. The evidence was on our side now. The neglect, the forged documents, the tape, the email, and Leo's own quiet courage. A court hearing was set within 48 hours. Vanessa hadn't just lost control. She'd abandoned it. And in her place, the truth had finally taken root. I tucked Leo into the motel bed that night, blankets pulled up to his chin, my old lullabies returning like second nature. He clutched my hand, eyes heavy with sleep. "Grandma? Yes, baby? Are we safe now?" I leaned in and kissed his forehead. "Yes," I whispered. "We're safe, and we're not going anywhere." The courtroom felt different this time. It wasn't as formal, not quite as polished, no jury box, no press in the gallery, just a small cluster of folding chairs and a judge who looked like she'd seen too much and believed too little. But behind her tired eyes, I could sense something else: decency, wisdom, and maybe, just maybe, the patience to listen. Vanessa wasn't there. Her attorney, Marcus, sat alone, arms crossed, his expression tight. Whatever plan they'd had, it had cracked, and the leak was now a flood. Lawrence stood beside me, calm as ever, his folders lined up like soldiers. Cassandra held Leo's hand as they sat just outside the courtroom. He had a coloring book, but he wasn't drawing, just watching me, watching everything. The judge glanced over the stack of documents we'd submitted: Damon's journal, the forensic report on the forged signatures, the letter Vanessa never sent, and finally, the video. She watched it all. She didn't ask many questions, but she took notes. When it was time for our side to speak, Lawrence kept it simple. "We are not here to destroy Miss Ford," he said. "We are here to protect Leo Ford and to honor the intent of Damon Ford, his father, who documented before his death serious concerns about his wife's behavior, intentions, and fitness as a parent." He paused. "And we are here to provide this boy with stability, safety, and love, something Miss Geneva Ford has never stopped offering, even when forced out of her home, out of his life, and into hiding." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Ford, do you wish to speak?" I stood slowly, hands folded in front of me. "I never thought I'd be back in a courtroom," I began. "And I certainly never imagined I'd be here fighting for the right to love my grandson." My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. My son, Damon, was many things: a builder, a dreamer, a father. But above all, he was protective. He saw what was happening. He tried to leave clues, because he knew someone had to finish what he started. "I have look this tame." I reached into my bag and pulled out Leo's notebook. "He gave this to me," I said, holding it up. "He draws pictures of his dad, his home, his dreams, and in every page I see the boy I raised." I looked straight at the judge. "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for permission to protect the only piece of Damon I have left." The room went quiet. Marcus stood next, trying to soften the blow. My client was under stress. Grief manifests in many forms. We do not dispute that mistakes were made, but this is a matter best handled in mediation, not in emergency custody. The judge held up her hand. "Enough." Her voice silenced the room. She leaned back, hands folded. "In my time on this bench, I've seen families tear themselves apart for less. Money, ego, old wounds, but rarely have I seen such a clear trail of fear, deception, and neglect. It is not the job of this court to punish grief, but it is my job to protect a child." She paused. I am awarding temporary custody of Leo Ford to Geneva Ford, effective immediately. I gasped. My knees almost gave out. Cassandra grabbed my arm. The judge continued. Pending full review of the estate and a formal custody evaluation, Leo will remain in her care. Supervised visitation may be granted to Miss Vanessa Ford once she responds to this court summons and provides evidence of stability. She struck her gavel once. Court is adjourned. And just like that, it was done. I turned to see Leo burst from the hallway, running into my arms. I dropped to my knees, holding him as tightly as he held me. You don't have to go back? He asked, eyes wide. No, baby, I whispered. We're going home. That evening, I packed our things from the motel and loaded them into Cassandra's SUV. Leo buckled his seatbelt, chattering about the art project he missed and whether we could stop for pancakes on the way. Cassandra wiped her eyes, grinning. He's going to be okay. He's better than okay, I said. He's free. The house we moved into wasn't the old one, not yet. That battle was still unfolding. But it was ours, a small rental on a quiet street with a front porch and a tire swing already hanging in the yard. Leo ran straight to it. I stood by the door, looking out at the world that had nearly swallowed me whole and now offered a second chance. I had faced fire, shame, betrayal, but I'd also found strength I didn't know I had, because I wasn't just Damon's mother anymore. I was Leo's guardian, and the next chapter would be written with both of our hands. 2 weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Mornings with pancakes and cartoons, afternoons filled with sidewalk chalk, math homework, and garden walks, evenings with warm baths, bedtime stories, and whispered memories of Damon that floated between us like shared breaths. Leo had begun to laugh again, not cautiously, but freely. His shoulders, once tense with watchful fear, relaxed when I reached to brush his curls or ruffled his jacket. He had a favorite chair now, a squeaky recliner in the corner of the living room, where he'd read or sketch for hours with his notebook in hand. We were healing, and yet, I knew better than to believe the silence would last. Vanessa had vanished after the hearing. No responses to court summons, no calls to the school. Her lawyer had gone dark. Not even Lawrence's team could trace her through standard channels. Until that Thursday morning. I was pulling weeds in the front yard, Leo off at school, Cassandra inside, brewing coffee when a sleek black car slowed in front of the house. The window rolled down, and there she was, Vanessa. Hair shorter now, dyed a cooler shade of blonde. Sunglasses covered her eyes, but I recognized the tightness in her jaw. Her mouth curled in that same old smirk, the one she used when she thought she still held the upper hand. I stood, brushing dirt from my gloves. You've got a lot of nerve, I said flatly. She took the glasses off. I want him back. No. She blinked, as if surprised I didn't flinch. He's my son, she said, the edges of her voice beginning to crack. You think you can play mother now, after all this? I walked closer, slow and deliberate, until we were only a few feet apart. You lost the right to call yourself his mother when you left him at school like an unwanted package. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I had to leave. It was all collapsing. I needed to think. You abandoned him. I was protecting him, she snapped. From the circus you're turning this into. Damon tried to protect him too, I replied, voice tightening. But you didn't let him finish. Her nostrils flared. You think some journal entries and a sob story make you the hero? No, I said, but they make you accountable. She exhaled sharply, as if trying to steady herself, then leaned in. If you don't return Leo, I'll make this messy. You think the court will give a senior citizen permanent custody over his mother? I've played this game longer than you realize. I'm not playing anymore, I said, and neither is the law. She paused just for a moment, then said, Damon was never as perfect as you believed. He had secrets. You think that little journal was the whole story? You think he didn't lie to you too? That landed harder than I wanted to admit, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing it. You had your chance to speak under oath, I said. You walked away. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Don't get comfortable. I'll be back. And next time, I won't come alone. She sped off, the car tires kicking gravel onto the sidewalk. Cassandra came out seconds later. What did she want? She asked, breath tight. To rattle me, I said. But she brought the wrong storm. We met with Lawrence that evening. She's desperate, he said after hearing everything, which makes her unpredictable. We'll increase security, notify the school, and request a formal protective order. She mentioned Damon having secrets, I murmured. Is there any chance? Lawrence shook his head. Geneva, you know your son. You read his words. That tape wasn't a confession, it was a warning. But if there's something more, we'll find it. Cassandra tapped her laptop. There's one document we haven't fully translated, she said. It's in Damon's handwriting, but it's mixed with codes, project notes, sketches, coordinates maybe? I thought it was part of his architecture work. She spun the laptop around. I recognized the heading. Project Argon, Client Revisions, Final Phase. That's the build he was working on before he passed, I said. Cassandra zoomed in on a set of numbers. These look like GPS coordinates. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. Where to? She copied them into a map tool. A small red pin dropped. Storage facility, she said. Outside Marietta. Under Damon's name. Paid up for a year in advance. I stared at the screen. Another piece of the puzzle. Another voice from the grave whispering, Keep going. I want to see it, I said. We'll go together, Lawrence replied. First thing tomorrow. That night, I sat by Leo's bedside longer than usual. He was asleep, one hand clutching his sketchbook, a half-finished drawing of our garden blooming under a giant sun. I brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, I won't let her take you. Outside the window, the wind picked up. But inside, I held still. Because this storm wouldn't find us unprepared. Not this time. The storage facility was the kind you'd miss if you blinked driving past gray rows of metal units stretching across a forgotten stretch of road just outside Marietta. A single office sat near the gate, manned by a woman with pink glasses and a raspy southern accent. She squinted at the paperwork Lawrence handed her. Unit 314, she said after checking Damon's name. Been paid in full till next March. Real quiet, that one. Came in late, always alone. The gate buzzed open. We walked down the long row in silence. I could feel my pulse in my neck as we approached the door. Something in me knew this wasn't just boxes of blueprints or leftover materials from Damon's last project. This was intentional, secret. Lawrence inserted the key. The door rolled open with a long metallic groan. At first, it looked like any other storage unit shelves, crates, dusty canvas tarps covering old furniture. But as we stepped in, we saw the corner, a desk, a file cabinet, and a black safe bolted into the wall. Cassandra moved first, pulling the tarp from the desk. On top was a leather-bound binder labeled Argon Phase 2, Confidential. She opened it slowly. Blueprints, she said. But not for a building. She turned the page. We leaned closer. Schematics for a tech system, home automation, security protocols, biometric scans. And at the bottom, the name of a company, Atheris Corp. Damon was consulting for them, Lawrence said. But this isn't architecture. This is encryption, data shielding. This is espionage-level protection. Cassandra flipped further. Notes in Damon's handwriting filled the margins. They want backdoors. Told them no. Why is Vanessa asking for access? She's not on the project. If I disappear, it's not an accident. I felt my knees go weak. Lawrence steadied me. He knew, I whispered. He knew something deeper was going on. Cassandra found a USB stick taped under the desk. She popped it into her laptop. Encrypted folders. Hundreds of them. One opened without a password. It was a video. Damon sat in the frame, but this time he looked different. Not tired, not afraid, angry. If this file's open, then someone's finally listening, he said. What I found buried in the Argon contract wasn't just security flaws, it was access. To homes, to bank systems, surveillance feeds. And when I raised red flags, Vanessa started asking questions. Then Marcus called. And Ray. He leaned forward. They're working together. I don't have proof yet, but I know I'm being followed. Emails disappearing, phones tapping out. I moved the files here for safekeeping. He looked away for a second. Then, back at the camera. Mom, if it's you watching, don't stop. Don't let them bury this. The screen went dark. I sat there in silence. It wasn't just a family betrayal. It was a conspiracy. A trail Damon had uncovered, then hidden piece by piece. And now it was in our hands. Cassandra turned to the safe. "We need to get this open," she said. "There could be more." Lawrence nodded. "I'll call in a locksmith." We stepped outside for air while we waited. The Georgia sun was hot overhead, but I felt cold. Vanessa wasn't just a grieving widow with questionable morals. She was involved in something dangerous, something that may have cost Damon his life. The locksmith arrived within the hour. The safe cracked open with a click that echoed across the unit. Inside, 3 items. 1. A thick envelope marked, "For Leo, when he's ready." 2. A flash drive in a metal case. 3. A small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch first. Inside was Damon's watch, his favorite. The one he wore when he was nervous. The one he wasn't wearing the night he died. I slipped it into my pocket. Cassandra loaded the flash drive. More documents, emails, screenshots, spreadsheets, tracing a pattern of money transfers from Atheris Corp into shell companies linked to Marcus. And then, another shock. One of those companies was tied to a trust under Leo's name. "I think they were laundering money through your grandson," Cassandra whispered. Lawrence's face went pale. She wasn't just after Damon's estate. She was using Leo as a cover. The implications were staggering. Vanessa had access to Leo's trust. She had financial power in his name and was using it to cover illegal transactions connected to Damon's last project. We took everything, filed it, secured it, and the next morning, Lawrence filed a motion for federal review and contacted a friend at the U.S. Attorney's Office. This was no longer just a custody case. This was criminal. By the time we returned home, Leo was waiting on the porch. He ran into my arms before I could even say hello. "Did you find the treasure?" he asked. I smiled through the ache in my chest. "Something better," I said. "Pieces of your daddy he left just for you." Why I did different. That night, I opened the envelope Damon had labeled for Leo. Inside were letters, one for every birthday from now until age 18. Each sealed, each dated. I held the first one in my hand and let my tears fall freely. Damon hadn't just left clues for justice. He'd left a father's love behind, too. The storm broke wide open the next morning. I was pouring coffee, the smell of toasted bagels in the air, when Lawrence called. "She's been arrested." I froze, mug halfway to my lips. "Vanessa?" "Yes. Early this morning, the FBI executed a warrant fraud, conspiracy, financial crimes across state lines. The data from the storage unit was enough to trigger a formal investigation into Atheris Corp. Marcus, too. He's in custody." I sank into the kitchen chair, breath shallow. "So it's over?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. But the tide just turned. News broke within hours. My phone didn't stop buzzing journalists, legal observers, a few family members who had once taken Vanessa's side. Suddenly, everyone had something to say. Everyone wanted the truth. But the truth had already spoken. It sat in Leo's smile, in his drawings, in the unopened envelopes from a father who'd refused to let silence win. By mid-afternoon, reporters camped outside the house. I kept Leo inside, pulled the blinds. Cassandra handled them like a seasoned press agent, calm and firm. "No comment. Please respect the privacy of a grieving family." But not everyone stayed behind the lines. Around 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. I expected another reporter. Instead, I found a woman I didn't recognize, mid-50s, sharp gray suit, soft brown eyes. "Mrs. Ford?" she asked. "Yes?" She held up a badge. "Special Agent Louise Carter, FBI." I let her in. We sat in the living room, Cassandra flanking me, Leo watching quietly from the stairs. Agent Carter got right to the point. "We reviewed the flash drives and the contents of your son's storage unit. What your son uncovered was a multi-million-dollar scheme to harvest user data from smart home systems illegally. Atheris was preparing to sell that data overseas." I closed my eyes. Damon's voice from the video echoed again. "They want back doors," told them no. "Vanessa?" I asked. She helped facilitate the transfers, likely under Marcus's direction. She may not have understood the full scope at first, but the paper trail shows she was complicit in hiding the funds once she did. And Leo's trust? Used as a pass-through, possibly to avoid scrutiny, that alone could trigger felony charges. Cassandra's hand found mine. Agent Carter softened her voice. We don't often get whistleblowers in these cases who leave a breadcrumb trail this clean. Your son was exceptional. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She stood to leave, then paused. You and your grandson are no longer just victims. You're witnesses, possibly targets. We're assigning protection. For now, that night, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a bunker. I tucked Leo into bed, keeping my smile steady. He'd seen the flashing lights from the news vans, heard the murmur of adults speaking in hushed tones. Is Mommy in trouble? He asked quietly. I sat beside him. She made some very bad choices, I said, and now she has to answer for them. Does that mean I won't see her again? I hesitated. I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that no matter what happens, you're safe, you're loved, and we're going to be okay. He nodded, lips tight, then whispered, I hope Daddy's proud of me. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. He is. More than you could ever know. The next day, we returned to court. Not for custody this time. For the will. Damon's final wishes had never been honored. Vanessa had forged, manipulated, and hidden the truth. But now, with new evidence, the court was ready to re-examine the terms of his estate. We walked into the courtroom, hand in hand, Leo and I. Vanessa, now in custody, appeared via video link. Orange jumpsuit, hair tied back. Her face was drawn, hollow. She looked at Leo. He didn't flinch. The judge addressed the court. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds that Geneva Ford is the rightful executor of Damon Ford's estate. All assets are to be frozen pending redistribution. The original will, filed 3 months prior to Damon Ford's death, names Miss Ford as guardian of Leo Ford and sole custodian of all related trusts. There was a murmur in the room. I held Leo's hand tighter. The judge continued. This court further recommends the initiation of permanent custody arrangements and will notify Child Services of this decision immediately. Vanessa said nothing. She didn't look away, but her eyes were empty. The gavel came down, and just like that, what had been stolen began to return. Not just money, not just property, but something more sacred, peace. That night, we had pancakes for dinner. Leo poured the syrup too fast. Cassandra burned the bacon. I laughed harder than I had in months, and for the first time since Damon's death, I felt him in the room not as a memory, but as a presence. In Leo's giggle, in the light through the window, in the silence that no longer felt lonely, there was still one letter left to open, the last one in the envelope, the one marked, "For Mom," after the storm. I hadn't dared touch it yet, but now, with the storm finally breaking, I was ready. I held it in my lap, the paper trembling as I unfolded it. If you're reading this, you did it. You stood in the fire, and you came out holding the truth. I never doubted you, Mom. I just ran out of time. I pressed the letter to my chest. He had never truly left. The days after the ruling passed in a strange kind of silence. Not the tense silence of fear or uncertainty, but the soft, tentative quiet that follows a long, devastating storm. You don't speak too loudly, afraid you'll wake whatever monster just went back to sleep. But as the hours became days, and the days began to feel like life again, I realized the storm hadn't just passed. We had survived it. Vanessa's case dominated the local news. Eventually, it made national headlines. Tech widow indicted in data theft scheme, the anchors called her. Reporters circled her name like vultures, dissecting every inch of her trial, her choices, her downfall. But for us, she had already become a ghost, fading, irrelevant. Leo never asked to visit her. Not once. Instead, he kept drawing houses, birds, bridges, and sometimes just stars. Stars that looked a little like eyes, like the ones Damon used to sketch on his napkins when his mind was somewhere else. We stayed in the rental a while longer, not because we had to, but because it felt like the right place to land before we decided where to build. One afternoon, Leo climbed into my lap holding the last letter Damon had written for him, age 18. "Can I read it now?" he asked. I smiled. "You think you're grown already?" He grinned. "Just curious." We read it together, his small fingers tracing the loops in Damon's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you're almost a man now. I wish I could see who you've become. I hope you're still curious, still kind. I hope you treat people better than they treat you. I hope you remember that love is worth fighting for even when it breaks your heart." Leo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "He sounds like a superhero." "He was better," I replied. "He was human, and still brave." Eventually, we moved. Not back into Damon and Vanessa's old house, we let that go, sold it, quietly, and used the money to start somewhere fresh. A 2-story home on the edge of a quiet town where the air smelled like pine trees and the neighbors still waved from their porches. We built a small garden. Leo named the tomato plants. Cassandra moved in down the road, and Lawrence, who had become something more like family than a lawyer, stopped by every Sunday for dinner, always with a pie, always with news. And I started writing. Letters, journals, pieces of our story, not to be published or shared, but kept, for Leo, for me, for the day when he'd want to tell his own. Sometimes I spoke at local community centers, sharing parts of the story about grief, resilience, and the quiet way justice sometimes shows up wearing a mother's shoes. Other times, I just sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the boy who had once been a question mark grow into an exclamation point. One evening, Leo asked if he could go by Damon's grave. We hadn't been in months. We packed flowers, 2 letters, one from him, one from me, and drove in silence. When we arrived, the sun was low, gold light pouring across the grass. Leo knelt first. "Hi, Dad," he whispered. "I got your letters. Thank you." Then he opened his notebook, the same one from all those months ago. "I made something for you." He placed a drawing at the base of the headstone. It was a picture of the 3 of us, me, Damon, and Leo, standing under a huge oak tree. Above it, a caption in shaky block letters, "Truth lives longer than lies." I knelt beside him, my fingers brushing the cold marble. "I hope you're at peace, son," I whispered. "We're okay now. We really are." On the drive home, Leo fell asleep in the back seat. And I, Geneva Ford, mother, grandmother, survivor, looked out at the open road ahead. The storms would come again. They always do. But I had weathered the worst one. And when it passed, I was still standing. With Leo. With truth. With the legacy of a man who tried to warn the world and a woman who loved him enough to listen. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens or headlines. Sometimes it comes in silence. In one small boy's laughter. In a letter read at sunset. In the quiet dignity of holding on. Long enough for the truth to speak. This story reminds us that truth has its own quiet power. Even when buried by betrayal, greed, or silence, it finds a way to rise through the strength of those who refuse to give up. Geneva's journey teaches us that justice isn't always loud or immediate, but it belongs to those who stand their ground, protect the innocent, and fight with love. In the end, integrity, no matter how bruised, outlasts deceit.